This is Inside Cape Cod. I'm Sarah Colvin. Today I am very pleased to welcome, I'm going to call you a Cape Cod icon, a Cape Cod legend, Don McKeag, to the studio. Don, I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much for asking, Sarah, and it's great because we were sharing some memories with the rest of the staff, Terry and everyone, and it brings back very fond memories.
Absolutely.
And of course I met your mom over at Titcomb's, and I'm tickled to have you be here.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for asking.
Well, likewise. And so, of course, the reason that you're here, among many other reasons, is that you've just written a book, a memoir, if you will, about your life, your entrepreneurial efforts, your work here on Cape Cod. And I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of the old days. You know, I grew up here on Cape Cod. I've always been fascinated with how things changed and definitely the way life used to be. It seems like people used to have a heck of a lot of fun here on Cape Cod.
Well, they did, and for a variety of reasons, of course. It was, again, it was not as popular in the 50s. I came down, my father owned the Skipper restaurant.
Oh, sure, in Yarmouth.
On the South Shore Drive in the 50s, and we had 2 hurricanes in 3 years, the poor soul. And but I go over there now, and it's a lovely restaurant. But I was a busboy, and pot washer. And that's a long time ago, 1953. I think I was 13. So.
Wow. So what was Cape Cod like in 1953? I mean,
well,
I think
as I say, it was much more quaint. And of course, the Cape Cod Highway wasn't that long in existence. And that changed everything. You know, I grew up in Weymouth, and Nantasket Beach and the Hull was a big place for a lot of the Boston people who ended up going to the Cape. It just was a long drive. And I remember as even younger than 13 when my folks would go down. My aunt and uncle had a place in Hyannis. And it was, I don't know, I can't remember how many hours, but so that was prohibitive to a lot of people over the bridge, you know, the other side going toward Boston. But once the highway was in and people started coming and building their own places, it was very reasonable too, you know.
Yes, not like today, for sure. And those costs have just kept going up. I think a lot of the times, even back in, you know, before the 50s, lots of artists, lots of people just seeking quiet and nature here on Cape Cod.
So quaint, very quaint.
And I think it still is in some aspects.
If you go, you know, it is. And of course, there was Patti Page singing, "If You're Fond of Sand Dunes." That was a big thing, you know, to the Cape.
Really?
They say it brought millions to the Cape.
Kind of the first marketing message for Cape Cod.
And she was wonderful.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, Don, tell me a little bit, you know, I think there's so many different aspects of your life, but tell me a little bit. I mean, you started here on the Cape as a kid, but obviously you made your career elsewhere before making your career here on the Cape. So talk to me a little bit about your journey. Don't want to give all the book away.
No, but I went to the University of Mass in Amherst and came here summers with my friends. Some of them played baseball in the Cape League, and then we all worked at different restaurants. And I've worked in probably 8 as a waiter and a bartender and then playing piano. But the first one that I remember that, well, the first one was really called the Bake Master, and it was owned by Duke Holmes. And he also owned, the reason I tell you this, it's kind of interesting, is it's long gone now. It's been a variety of things. Now it's a CVS, but what's next door was there then. It was there in the 40s, I guess, is the taffy shop. You know the taffy place?
Yep.
That's been there all that time, over 60 years.
So that's Yarmouth, right?
Yeah, that's Yarmouth, right on 28.
What I knew is the Compass Lounge,
that's
right? That's
what
now
it was.
the CVS.
Yeah, that was the Compass Lounge for a long time. Yeah, you remember that.
I do.
Yeah. But anyway, so I worked at a place called the Gay 90s. When gay meant happy. But anyway, but it's right on 28. Now it's the building's there, and it's an antique store. And across the street was a wonderful A-frame. It's still there, but it was a gift shop. And I'm trying to think now. I just had another one of those senior moments as to the name of the. I'll think of it. But Norman Godfrey and Laura, I remember the gal, and. There was also Lobster in the Rough at the light, the Great Island light.
Sure.
And that little Great Island place was very popular and very busy. It's not so much now.
Right. Is that kind of where...
Barefoot Trader, that was the name of it.
All right,
Do you remember
okay. I
yeah.
don't remember the Barefoot Trader, but I've seen pictures, and so I know what you're talking about.
And the Sandy Pond Club
yeah.
I worked at, which was behind now the Mill Hill, which is, of course, torn
I know,
down.
completely gone.
Yeah.
It must be kind of amazing to have been witness to all of these changes on the Cape. You know, I think about all the things that have changed in my lifetime, and certainly it's a different place now than it was back then. So, you know, all of these different restaurants, but you did spend time as a teacher too, correct?
Yes, and when I graduated from UMass, I went to business with my father for a while, and that didn't work out. So I went back and got certified. Unfortunately, that was when the president was killed. I was up in Amherst, and then I taught school in Hingham and Rockland. Loved it, and coached. But every summer, I was single, so every summer a bunch of us came down and stayed on the Cape at different places. In fact, while I think of it, you might be interested, Sarah, it's now a roast beef place up here on 28 in Yarmouth. And, but it was the first Dairy Queen on the East Coast.
Really?
I was told. And we used to stop as little kids. When the first summer was open, my uncle used to take all of us, my cousins and all. And I remember I always got peppermint, green mint fraps.
Oh.
So there it is.
I love the dairy. I think about the Dairy Queen in Harwichport, where we used to go as kids. And my grandmother, we used to always tell us, like, well, I can't help it. My car just wants to take us to Dairy Queen. Oh, yeah. It has to. We have to go there.
And there was women's wrestling, by the way.
Really?
Across the street from the Mill Hill. I think it was it was a golf course. It was a pitch and putt golf course. And there was a building or a tent, and they had women wrestling. That would be like the middle 50s, isn't that right?
Wow, that's amazing. I can't imagine that on Cape Cod now.
I know.
Let's talk a little bit, Don, about the Asa Burse House, because I think that is something really, it's a landmark people know. Of course, you can still see the building. The building is still there. The inside completely different.
And the building
on Main Street
looks beautiful,
in
but of course, I'm heartbroken that they tore down the reading room because it was in Yankee Magazine. But that was one of the last sea captains' houses on a Main Street thoroughfare, you know, with other buildings of that period. Now most of them, they've torn them down, or, you know. And it was owned by a man called Asa Burse, who was a ship's captain, and deep water ship's captain. So I was selling real estate for Kevin O'Neill, and I showed that for the people that owned it. They listed it with me, and I just loved it. It was 1840.
Wow. And
it had the beautiful sandwich glass panels on either side of the window, and a black fireplace, black marble fireplace. It was beautiful. And I could see it as a restaurant. My wife and I had just returned from Europe after 7 weeks, and we had a wonderful time, and I got the urge to. So that's how we did it. We bought it and then converted and added to it, and it became tremendously popular.
Absolutely.
And as I say, then the reading room, which was my real creation, and I loved it, and I loved all the collecting. And it was in Yankee, and that was, people used to fly in. It was amazing.
Absolutely.
You don't think the power of Yankee, it was really something.
It's a big deal.
They'd fly in from New York, private planes, just to see the room. Isn't that something?
That must have, and as the the creator, that must have felt
it
pretty
did,
good.
And that's why it's gone now. And I wish I'd had a chance to save it. I was in Florida. Didn't know what was going on.
Absolutely. So. And that was, I mean, the restaurant went through several iterations after you sold it,
sad.
and the reading room stayed, and then this last, the renovation. But you said something a minute ago that made me think of a theme that kind of I picked up in the book, and that was you kind of your urge to do something, and you kind of follow those urges, but it's almost like an urge to succeed, an urge to do better, an urge to do that next thing. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that, and kind of how you know when that feeling is there, and is it taking a big risk to do some of the things that you did?
No question, and a lot of business owners aren't given the credit, I think, for why the society is really upside down kind of now, in the fact that the way it used to be is those who bought businesses and ran, they were taking the risk, and they also had the chance of making the most money. And that is not quite the case now, and they're making it so hard for business people. But what, in reference to what I talk about in the book, and it was a very difficult thing to look at yourself. And I've made more than my share of mistakes, but I also I used to laugh at the saying. I'm Irish and Irish English, but I remember that the saying was, the Irish have is, if things are going too good, there must be something wrong. And I used to laugh like that about that all the time. And then I realized I have always been driven by this. So getting back to you, I think risk-taking, I mean, it's like an Evel Knievel. Why would anyone do what Evel Knievel and others have done? I mean, and he had his bones broke. He could have been killed, you know, 7 or 8 times, and he'd go back to it. And there's something in certain people, I guess, that I don't know whether it's a desire to beat yourself up. I don't know.
Sabotage,
I love
perhaps,
it. Yeah,
but
sabotage. But it's not very pleasant in a lot of ways, because I never stayed around long enough to really reap the benefits of some of the places that and of course then I ended up taking the Asa Burris house back.
Right.
And I didn't stay long there because it was over and done.
Exactly.
The place I really wish I'd have kept and should have was the Flying Bridge in Falmouth, because we closed in the winter. See, the problem, and you know enough about all the I feel for the restaurateurs. It's a really tough thing today.
Absolutely.
To make a living.
And there are so many restaurants
and that's
on
what
Cape
I
Cod.
mean. The competition is huge, and you still, yes, we have the shoulder season, and the Chamber's done a good job, and the people have brought, we have a year-round, but a lot of those people are full-timers, and they live, and they eat at home, and a lot of them go to Florida in the winter.
Right.
So now you've got all these restaurants. And when I was president of the downtown for a while, and I used to beg some of the restaurants, I said, we have to agree to close 2 or 3 weeks, each of us at a separate time, and give the help a break. And a lot of people say, well, I got to stay open, I'll lose my employees. Well, you're going to lose. I used to see the girls come in knowing they're not going to make any money on a snowy night.
Exactly.
So,
and with housing as expensive as it is on the Cape,
it's
you
very
need
tough.
to be making a decent salary to be able to do that sort of thing.
Trouble is, it's fun.
I know.
Did you ever work in a restaurant?
A very brief time, but yes, it was one of the
Waitress
most. I ran Expo, so I was running
you
from the
did?
kitchen
Oh,
to helping out the
yeah.
waitresses,
Oh,
and it was hot and sweaty, but it was it was definitely a lot of fun, and it's a family.
I've had so many wonderful people work for me and with me, and doing projects I loved more than running the businesses. I didn't like the businesses, but I loved forming them and seeing them all come together and hiring the staff and seeing them all work. It was really
Exactly,
wonderful.
and get them excited about it. So you mentioned the Flying Bridge, and this is really kind of an interesting property, and I didn't know much about it before I actually read about it in your book, but this is a large facility with marina slips and wedding facilities. So how did you get involved in that project?
Well, I was, my wife at the time, and she was tired of all my doing more and more, and we didn't get much time off, and so I decided, well, maybe it's time to move on. So my accountant was over, and Ed Heelan was over in Falmouth, and I went over there, and when I was leaving, I had gotten to know the owners, and his name was Phil Warmel, and that was the family that built the whole place. And as you saw in the book, it's kind of interesting in the fact that the grandfather, his name was Phillips, graduate of Princeton, and he invented the Phillips head screw.
Really?
Screwdriver, yeah. He also invented, I found this out in my research, he also invented the golf spike. He's the one that had the screw-in ball. Phil told me, his grandfather, there were more royalties on the golf spike than there were on the Phillips head, because I guess but that's the history of that, and the grandfather came to Falmouth Harbor, By the way, that's a man-made harbor, so you got to read the book because it's kind of interesting.
It really is.
A lot of people in Falmouth don't know that's a man-made harbor, Falmouth Harbor. And now it's a leased property. Bill Zammer does a good job, but he doesn't own the slips. I had the slips. I had a gas dock. It was really a big project, though. I had 65 employees or more, I think. But I should have, once again, it was time for me. I wanted to do something different. And actually now, see, I've got to tell myself this because I beat myself up when I sold that. But it wasn't for sale, and someone came in and offered me a huge amount of money, and I took it. So
that's what they say. Hindsight is 20/20.
That's right. Yeah. And so, I also, as you know, you've read it, that a lot of the things in the book, and I learned that, and I've tried to tell others, young people, kids, and if you look back at decisions you made, and you're sorry about it, you're conveniently forgetting that all the positives that came out of that decision, which they usually are, people I've met, things I've done, would never have happened if I'd have stayed and just, hired a manager and gone to Florida and sat there every winter. So I really don't. I just liked the place, and I liked the fact that you had a break. Those people in business on the Cape that are closed in the winters are the smart ones. They really are.
Absolutely. Yeah. Always important to have a break. So you lived for a while in Hyannisport.
I did.
And not only did you live in Hyannisport, but you had a good relationship with Senator Kennedy, the late Senator Ted Kennedy.
Teddy Kennedy, I loved him.
So how did you become friends with the senator?
I actually met him on a 4th of July fireworks night with Howard Penn, the Penns that own the wonderful. How many of those Puritan clothing are there now? I
think
forget.
there are 3 or 4. There's Chatham. I think they still have one in Orleans.
And then Mashpee.
Mashpee, yep, and Hyannis, of course.
Well, Howard was a good friend. Of course, they were right across the street. They were very integral in supporting the Ace of Earth when we first opened. But so Howard had a whole bunch of people on his boat, the Silver Fox. I think of him now.
That's
I look up
name.
here in my silver head. Anyway, and he knew I'd always wanted to meet. I remember I never met the president, but I saw him coming out of Mass and St. Francis when he was still a senator.
Wow.
And I liked him then. I liked his body language. And so I always hoped I'd meet Ted. And so we met then, but then it was another 13 or 14 years when I moved to Hyannisport that I became really friendly with him. So
absolutely.
And I count those as wonderful days. And I always mention there are so many people who don't like the Kennedys, and they have the rights to. But I make no excuses for everybody. But he really was so kind, and he did so much for the Cape and the hospitals and behind the scenes too. So.
Right, and I think that really is another mark of a true leader, is someone who doesn't want to ask for accolades for everything they do. Just
we
care
used to
about
go
the
sailing with retarded children, and you'd have people on. No press, nobody ever was around, and it was really very kind man. And we'll leave it at that.
That really says a lot. Yeah. That really, really does say. And I had the fortune to meet the senator a couple of times myself, and was always very struck by just how real he was.
Yeah.
And you don't
he
see
got
that
along
in a lot of
so
politicians.
well with, and that's what I, when you see the mess that the country's in politically today, you never would have had that when he was. He got along with both sides, and that's no small matter, as strong as he was in his, positions, he behind the scenes, I know, worked with a lot of people.
So the book is called "At Least I Owned a Rolls Royce."
Well, at least I owned a Rolls Royce, which I bought in the middle of Palm Beach on a rainy day. It was a 1959 white, beautiful. Oh, it was fun with a bar in the back. And it was the same model as one of my favorite movies is Arthur.
Okay,
Dudley Moore, when he falls on it. I never fell out of it.
That's good.
But yeah, I used, when I saw that, because his was blue and mine was white. But I used to love driving. I'd hire a little French girl to be my chauffeur. I really put the dog on, but laughing about it, you know.
Yeah. It's like you
And,
can, so why not, you know?
I don't know if we got time. I have one
Sure.
little quick
Please do.
story of the rolls. I bought it, but this guy came into this pouring rain, and he sits next to me, and he gets me soaked because he takes his raincoat off. So I'm sitting there, and it's dark, but it was wonderful because it's, you know, lunchtime, and it's Palm Beach, and it's winter, and it's crowded, and well, it was wonderful. So, being the quiet man I am, so anyway, he says, "How are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm fine. How you doing? You get pretty wet there." And so it turns out he was going through a bad divorce, and he had this car that he had to sell. Well, I had just bought a beautiful little house that was built by the Arnold Bread people, small place, just up the street, and it had an empty garage, so I didn't have a car down in Florida. So I said, "Well, I might be interested." I said, "What is it?" He said, "It's a Rolls Royce." I said, No, I'm not interested in a Rolls Royce.
A little too ostentatious.
Yeah, he said, "It's an old one. It's 59. Well, I love vintage stuff. So he said, "You got to look at it." So we went and looked at it out in West Palm. And the reason that's pertinent is so I fell in love with the place, and I bought it right. And so I came back, and so I bought it anyway. So now I took it over about, I don't know, maybe might even be 6 months later, and to have it serviced. And when I was leaving, I look, and there's this pink umbrella, and this girl with a lime green bikini on, selling hot dogs. She had a hot dog stand there. And she's there, and there's a line of guys, of course, getting hot dogs.
Of course.
It's right on the highway in one of the parking lots. So I said, that looks interesting. And of course, to justify it, I said, well, I haven't had lunch, you know, like I wasn't going to see the...
You're not really there after the hot dogs.
I pull the car in, and I get in line. And I'm talking with the guys. Most of them were working guys. And the next thing I know, a television van comes in with the
satellite truck and whatever.
Yeah. And a gal gets out with a guy with a camera, and they walk over and said, "Who owns the Rolls Royce?" And I said, "Well, I do. Why?" They said, "Oh, can we take a picture of it?" I said, "Well, we want to interview you and Bikini Girl." And she was a nice girl too. And so I said, "Why?" They said, "Well, you know, sir, it isn't very often that you see a vintage Rolls Royce parked with a guy buying hot dogs from a girl in a lime green bikini." So we had, and the girl loved it, of course, and we just laughed. And I forgot to, they said it's going to be on the 6 o'clock news, and I totally forgot.
Oh, no. So you never got to see that.
No, and
that
I
one
have off,
moment of
I
fame.
go down, I was just down there this winter for a short time, and I can't remember what the call signals were, but I wonder if they'd ever have that in their file. Probably not. That was 95, 96. Imagine that's 20 years ago.
I'm sure you might be able to
Might
find
be.
it somewhere.
But anyway,
that's fantastic.
So that's where the Rolls came into the title. Also as a signal to the ups and downs. At least I owned a Rolls. Now I drive a Volkswagen Beetle, but I love it.
I saw that out in the parking lot.
But I love it. Yeah,
it's a great car. No, but I think too, you know, you did really have you're continuing to have really a fantastic life.
Oh, I have a lot of fun.
You know, and it speaks a lot to doing what you want and enjoying it and taking those risks.
Yeah.
Right. So, Don, where can people find the book if they want to buy it?
Well, I've been very fortunate to have wonderful bookstores want to carry it, and we're here in Yarmouth. In Orleans, there's Booksmith, Musicsmith. In Chatham, it's the Yellow Umbrella, which I'm very happy to have.
Great bookstore.
Yeah, and then Books by the Sea in Osterville, and in Mashpee, Market Street Books.
Oh, great, Mashpee Commons.
Yeah, Mashpee Commons, and that's done well. And of course, I mentioned Titcomb's in Sandwich on 3A. And on the 14th of May, I'm going to be, I was on the board of the Hyannis Library years ago when I was at the Ace of Earth, and they asked me if I'd like to have a table. They want me to have the book there. So that'll be nice if you're going to be down in Hyannis.
Great.
If anybody
Yeah,
walking
spring on
there,
me.
they can buy the book there. But you can also buy it on PayPal.
Great.
My website's donaldmckeag.com.
Perfect.
And that could, yeah.
Easy to remember. Well, Don, thank you
so
so much.
so much. A pleasure, Sarah.
Pleasure talking with you, and I hope
we had fun.
we did have fun, always.
Hope I'll see you again, too.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Well, Don McKeag, of course,
Okay.
Well, at least I owned a
Yes.
Rolls Royce is the name of the book, has been my guest today on Inside Cape Cod. I'm Sarah Colvin.